welcome to the Snarky Physicist. I am KM. As you can see, it is really dark in here. I want to do a color demo today, but it turns out it has to be really dark to do it, but I think it's worth it. Let's take a look. You've probably heard that mixing light colors is not quite the same as mixing paint colors. So if I mixed blue paint and green paint, you'd expect to get some sort of deep turquoise or aqua color. You get kind of the same thing when you mix the lights also. It's just a brighter color actually. There we go. So now we got the red and blue. You learned in kindergarten that red and blue make purple, and you get this nice light magenta color. So that's pretty cool. This one is a little bit more weird though. If instead of using the blue, I use the green. So now I've got the red and the green. You probably learned in kindergarten that red and green together make brown. So I put them together and you get yellow. If I put red and green and blue all together, you get this sort of white in the middle. That's what white is. It's a combination of red, blue, and green. So you've got your additive primaries. That is, when you add red and green together, you get yellow. When you add red and blue together, you get magenta. And when you add green and blue together, you get what's called cyan. That's what that color's called. So the interesting thing about these colors, yellow, cyan, and magenta, is you can mix those together too as paints and get some interesting results off of that. For instance, if you were to mix cyan ink with yellow ink, you end up with green. If you mix cyan ink with magenta ink, you end up with blue. And if you mix yellow ink and magenta ink, you end up with red. In theory, you have to have perfect pigments, and this is why your printer also has black ink, because in theory, if you were to mix all three of them together, you would get black, but you kind of just end up getting this kind of pasty brown color, just like happens when you mix all the colors in your paint panel together in general. You should, in theory, get black, but your pigments aren't perfect. If you have magenta paint, it's supposed to absorb all of the green, which means that it shines back red and blue. If you have yellow paint, it's supposed to absorb all of the blue, which means it shines back green and red. And if you have cyan paint, it's supposed to absorb all of the red, which means it shines back blue and green. And that makes sense because that's exactly the combinations we saw. If you mix blue and green light, you get cyan, for instance. For some reason it works out that if you mix red and yellow, you pretty consistently get a nice orange. But it's not always the orange you wanted. You remember as a kid mixing two colors together, and sometimes it just didn't come out the shade you wanted, and probably you were too young to be thinking about putting those colors in different proportions to get the shades that you wanted. So maybe that did or didn't work out for you. I also have these beauties. I've got a bright red light. If I put on the blue light at the same time, if I put all three, you're kind of getting something a little bit more white, but what's more interesting here is the shadows that I cast, all right? Because you can see my cyan shadow. That's where the red has been blocked. You can see my magenta shadow over here, and somewhere in the middle, you can see my yellow shadow too, because that's where I am blocking out the blue in the middle. But maybe even more interesting than this, is where my fingers are blocking out two colors of light at once. Here, I'm blocking out the red and blue, so you just see the green. Here, I'm blocking out the blue and green, so you just see the red, and maybe I can make them overlap in just such a way you can see the blue somewhere. Right there. You see where my thumb is overlapping with my other fingers, and you see this like blue shadow right in there. Of course, where they all overlap, you see a black shadow. I think they have this demo at like the Exploratorium, but not everybody gets to make it themselves. Usually in class, I pull these out and it turns into some sort of dance party where people make shadows on the wall. In any case, hopefully you learned something today. If you want to show me your experiences mixing these colors together, because I haven't seen anybody do this and I don't have magenta and yellow paint, send me a video response. That would be really cool. If you have questions or suggestions for future demos, leave them in the comments, like this video if you liked it, and subscribe if you want to hear more.